humility is a superpower, especially in today's day and age when we're so self-consumed and we're so braggadocious and we're so flashy, right? But for me, humility held me back so much because, it's like the Nelson Mandela quote, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond belief. And, he says, who are you not to be successful and beautiful and accomplish these things? There's nothing enlightened about watering yourself down so that other people don't feel insecure around you. And I feel like that's what I always did. It was always like, okay, well, I can find some success, but I don't want to become too successful because what if the people around me think that that I think I'm better than them, right? And I think that can be a superpower because you care about other people and you want to bring people with you and you care about how you come off and you care about how you affect other people's lives. But it can also be your greatest foothold and your greatest stumbling block, because if you're constantly self-sabotaging yourself just to make sure you don't perform so well or create a life so beautiful and blissful that other people feel insecure around you. So I think that was the deep-seated battle, an inner battle that I was constantly dealing with. And then you get a little bit older and you realize, man, okay, it's been decades now that I've put this work in. It's been decades now that I've operated with integrity. It's been decades now that I observe who I'm around and how hard I work. And wait a second, I deserve to be successful and I deserve to get to a crazy amount of success. And if people want to form their opinions, that's fine. But ultimately, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I also know what I was created for. So I've given myself more and more permission as the years go by to realize these dreams are something that aren't just attainable, but they are almost a requirement that I need to do, that I need to go tackle in order to reach as many people as I possibly can.
Surprisingly, I think that idea of not being enough and putting yourself down is amongst high achievers, I think is quite frequent. I think like you say, a lot of people's perception is that people are braggadocious, people are out there, and it exists. Don't get me wrong, it definitely exists. But I think a lot of people struggle with that internal battle, and I think that's where there's this huge growth from. Not putting yourself down, not being. At times, I think it's required though, but not being so negative.
I actually just had this conversation with somebody, and I love the idea of therapy, and I love the idea of engaging in things. There was something called neurofeedback, where they're checking out your brain, and they talk about the alpha and the beta and the delta and the theta waves and all these different things. And I was going over my brain map because I just got the analysis done, and I had the expert, the therapist, the lady say, talk about these certain areas of my brain and say, hey, do you have a problem with holding yourself to a high standard? Or do you have a problem with, getting down on yourself whenever you make a mistake? Or do you have a problem with, this self-deprecating thoughts and these things? And I had a moment there where I didn't want to push back because I know I could probably be better at it. But at some point, I do believe that we need these things. If you hold yourself to a high standard, it's okay to say, you know what, Michael, you messed up here. You're better than that. You are more disciplined than that. You are kinder than that. You hold yourself to a standard in which you need to operate a certain way. So I think we don't want to become so much of a fixer of these things that really have made us successful too, right? Like if I didn't hold myself to a high standard, if I wasn't hard on myself, if I didn't expect a lot out of myself, would I be sitting here today talking to you? Could I be better at them? Is there a fine balance? Maybe. But a lot of times those are the catalysts for continued growth to get yourself to the next level.
I definitely think that to begin with, you need that. Like you have to have that. I think maybe there's like an inflection point where greatness lies slightly beyond it, and like realizing that I think there's that point to realize you are great, and that maybe that voice needs to be quietened down a little bit. So it's really interesting. Again, I said that I'd listened to the Rogan podcast, and I think you'd started talking about that sort of inflection point for yourself. And I thought it was fantastic the way the conversation went. So we'll touch on that. But just to pull it back a little bit, I'm curious as to, I spoke to you about this earlier, so I'm asking you to repeat yourself, but physically as a child, like, were you a phenom? Was you an athlete? Like, where people were like, that kid needs to get into sport, like he's built, like, what was this sort of outward look from other people and, from yourself? Like, when you looked in the mirror as a kid, what did you look like? And was it obvious at that time?
No, what was obvious was that I was undersized on every team that I was on. I was one of the smallest, if not the smallest, on every baseball team, every soccer team, every football team. Obviously, that's why I gravitated towards wrestling. Wrestling, there's weight classes. You got your heavyweight, who's 250, and you got your 98 pounder, your 103 pounder. And I thought, okay, well, this sport is for 103 pounders. This sport's for 112 pounders. This sport's for 119 pounders, guys that are my size, right? I think back to Little League Baseball, and me and my cousin Ryan were the two smallest kids. We were about the same size, and every other kid was 3 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches taller than us, 20, 40, 50, 60 pounds heavier than us, cranking the ball, guys hitting triples all the way to the fence. And me and cousin Ryan were smaller, and we were undersized, but we were fast, and we ran as hard as we possibly could. We were smart. We were good with catching and moving, and we were utility type of players. So I think that was the story that was being told to me subconsciously, like, right, well, you're different than all the other kids because you're smaller. You're different than all the other kids because you are shorter, you're lighter, you're looked at as the smallest kid on the team. And I never really got made fun of or anything like that. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was bullied or I was really truly self-conscious about it. Of course, yeah, I wish I was as tall as my cousin Frankie, or I wish I was as big as Gabe, on the team, who was, way, like, hit puberty at like 11 years old. And, I didn't have hair in my armpits until I was 18 years old. But I think that, so subconsciously it was saying, hey, you're different in this way. But I was more of a late bloomer. And now the man you see today and the body that I have built, I didn't really hit my peak until I was in my mid-20s, and then now I still feel it at 38 years old. I feel like I'm 25 years old, in energy and athleticism and all those different things. So everybody is on a different path, right? And everybody has different genetic gifts. And me, I was just more of a late bloomer. So I definitely didn't have any gifts aside from, man, that kid listens. Man, that kid is attentive. Man, that kid can take direction. Man, that kid is coachable. Man, that kid runs really hard. He swings really hard. He tries really hard. That was the only thing that I had that a lot of other people didn't have. But I wouldn't have had that if I didn't feel like I was the runt of the litter, if I didn't feel like I was the smallest guy on the team, if I didn't feel like I had to overcompensate with attention to detail and running faster and harder than anybody else and trying harder than anybody else. So I was not athletically gifted, aside from the fact that I was willing to try harder than everyone else.
As many of you know, we are independent creators and filmmakers, but there is a massive attack on us right now. Traditional media over the last few years has started to slowly die. They are no longer the independent voice that you first thought they were. That's why we've created Mulligan Brothers Patreon. We've built something special for our most dedicated supporters, and I want to break it down for you real quick. The supporter tier gets you ad-free early access to both video and audio versions of Mulligan Brothers interviews 24 hours before it goes public. The executive tier gets you everything that a supporter tier gets, plus more. Exclusive interviews and behind the scenes content, walk and talks, daily routines, unreleased interviews, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And finally, the executive producer tier. Everything from the supporter tier and the executive tier, plus exclusive perks. Access to our treatment packages. Be the first to see which guests are coming up and get an insight into the topics we'll be discussing before anyone else. And you'll even get an executive producer credit on every single documentary that we make. So if you've ever wanted to support the Mulligan Brothers mission of inspiring change so we can go around the world and get these stories that nobody else will, this is exactly how you do it. Go to patreon.com/Mulligan Brothers or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Join the community and help us inspire change.